Hey guys, welcome to Learn Python the Hard Way. In this exercise, exercise 14, we're going to focus on prompting and parsing. And as always, you can find the link to this chapter in the description below. Since this is part of the paid section of the Learn Python the Hard Way book, if you don't have the book, feel free to just follow along with the video. So in the previous exercise, we focused on using argv from the sys module to actually pass command line arguments to our program and process them. And we also briefly used input. In this exercise, we're going to focus on using both argv and input together to ask the user for specific information. And this will be the foundation for some future exercises where we focus on learning on how to read and write files. So let's get started, and in this exercise we use the input function slightly differently by having it print a simple greater than prompt. So as always, we are going to open up our terminal, and from here, since I'm using Visual Studio Code as a text editor, I'm going to type in code and then the name of the file. So exercise 14.py, and this is going to open a new Python file. And the first step, of course, is to import the sys module, or from the sys module we're actually going to import argv. Next, we're going to take the input we get from argv when we run our program, and we're going to assign this input to two different variables, to the script variable, which of course will be the name of our script file, which is basically exercise 14.py, and then the second command line argument will be the username that we provide. Next, let's define a prompt variable, which is simply the greater than character, and then we're going to use printf to print out a string. Here we're going to enter the username that we get from the command line argument and use printf again to render it in our string here. So hi username, then we embed the script variable in our print statement here. Next, let's add another print statement. I'd like to ask you a few questions. So that's just a regular print statement that we use, and then we use another printf. Do you like me? And we enter the username variable. And then we're going to provide a prompt. So here we use the input function, and we provide it with a prompt input, which again is just this greater sign and a space character. And the input that we provide is then going to be assigned to the likes variable. Next, we're going to add another print statement, printf to be precise. Where do you live? Username. And then again, we're going to prompt the user. What kind of computer do you have? And again, we're going to prompt the user for the input. And that's the reason why we're using the prompt variable here. So we basically, if we want to change the input here, for example, if we want to add an extra space, we can just change that in one place, and then wherever we use the prompt variable here, that will automatically be changed. So we only have to change it once. And finally, we're going to use again printf with this time 3 quotation marks. And as we saw in the previous exercise, that is very helpful if you want to have a multi-line print statement where we provide strings that span multiple lines. Then we use the triple quotation mark to basically start and finish a multi-line print statement. And again, here we are going to use our variables that we set previously when we asked the user for input. All right, so let's save this here. And here, just as an additional explanation, we make a variable prompt that is set to the prompt we want. So in this case, greater than space. And we give that to the input instead of typing it over and over. Now, if you want to make the prompt something else, we just change it in this spot and then rerun the script. It's very handy. Yeah, that's basically what we saw before. So if we add an additional space character, for example, that will be changed in any of those cases where we're using the prompt variable. So let's head over to our terminal here. And now we can execute our code file by, first of all, passing the name of the script. So exercise 14.py and then the name. So let's press enter. So now it says, hi Zed, I'm the exercise 14.py script. I'd like to ask you a few questions. So that is basically the first part here that we entered. And now we basically start with the input function here to ask the user additional questions about him. Do you like me, Zed? So let's type out yes. Where you live, Zed? San Francisco. What kind of computer do you have? Tandy 1000. And then it says here, all right, so you said yes about liking me, you live in San Francisco, not sure where that is, and you have a Tandy 1000 computer, nice. Great, so that's how we basically use the command line arguments in combination with the input function. Let's take a look at the study drills, find out what the game Zork and Adventure were, try to find a copy and play it. So Zork here is an old adventure game which was here available for the Atari, and apparently it was published in 1980, so quite a while ago. Change the prompt variable to something else entirely. Okay, so let's take a look at this here, and then let's say instead of greater than, let's just type enter in all caps, and let's go back here and run this one more time, and then it says enter here. So yes, let's just enter the same input. So it's very handy. We just had it to change it in one spot, and it updated it in all the instances where we're using it. Add another argument and use it in your script the same way you did in the previous exercise with first, second, and assign to argv. Alright, so let's add an additional argument. So let's say, for example, we're going to add age here as well as an additional argument. And then we should also prompt the user for that. So let's maybe add this in here. Oh, excuse me, it should of course be here at the beginning, because we would actually not ask the user for input, but we would provide it as a command line argument. So let's say we're going to use printf. Okay, and let's just add this here as the second line just before we start asking the question. And now if we go back to our terminal here, we can of course run our script again. Python 3, then the name of the script, so exercise 13, the username and the age of the user, and then let's see, that was not correct. Oh, excuse me, it should be exercise 14. Let's run that again. Yeah, and then it says here it provides the value that we entered in here, so that is correct. And then of course we can enter those values again to execute our program. Finally, we have, make sure you understand how I combined 3 quotation mark style multi-line string with the open close curly braces format activator as the last print. So here, if we take another look, we use those 3 quotation marks. Actually, if we just remove one, for example, we see it's not highlighted again, so then it would no longer work. So we need to use those 3 quotation marks, and we use printf, similar to how we did this up here, to insert and then render some variables that we provide. And of course, we can also do that for multi-line print statement here. We can then enter multiple variables and they will be rendered correctly as we saw basically when we executed the script here and we provided those values using input. Let's take a look at some common student questions. So the first one is, I get syntax error, invalid syntax when I run the script. Again, you have to run it on the command line, not inside Python. Alright, so that means we basically need to make sure that we're here in the command line. If instead we type out, for example, Python 3.6, and then we run it inside of this idle environment here, then of course we will run into an error, because if we now try to type out Python 3 or Python 3.6 exercise 14.py and then for example this, then we will get another error, because again we need to run this outside of that REPL environment directly here in the terminal itself. I don't understand what you mean by changing the prompt. See the variable prompt, so up here, change it to a different value. You know this, it's just a string and you've done 13 exercises making them, so find the time to figure it out. Alright, so that was basically what we did here. We just changed that starting from this value here, the greater than character, to another value. I get the error, value error need more than one value to unpack. Remember what I said, you need to look at what you should see with this section and replicate what it did. You need to do the same thing here and focus on how I type the command in and why I have a command line argument. So that actually I ran into this just a while ago because I provided the wrong exercise name here, and the previous exercise was asking for 4 command line arguments, or once we modified it, asked for 5. So we always need to make sure that we provide the correct number of command line arguments, in this case 3 values, which corresponds to exactly those 3 values here that we get from argv. So that's very important. How can I run this from idle? Don't use idle. Alright, so that's basically what we saw before when we typed in Python 3 and we jumped into this environment. We should not be using that. Can I use double quotes for the prompt variable? You totally can. Go ahead and try that. Alright, so instead of using single quotes, you can just use double quotes, and that should work just as well. So let's just run that again real quickly, and yeah, you can see the prompt is still displayed. So that's working perfectly fine. So that still works. You have a Tandy computer. I did when I was little. Alright. I get name error, name prompt is not defined when I run it. User spells the name of the prompt variable wrong or forgot that line. Go back and compare each line of code to mine from at the bottom of the script to the top. Anytime you see this error, it means you spelled something wrong or forgot to create the variable. Right, so if we, for example, did this here, we're using the prompt variable here, but then maybe later on we do this and didn't type it correctly, then we would run into an error. As soon as we try to execute it here, then it would say name prompt is not defined, or the other way around. If we, for example, typed it incorrectly here and then execute that, then here it says name prompt is not defined. So we always have to be careful to type it out correctly, and if that's the case, then it would be executed correctly. Alright, and that's it for exercise 14, and see you guys in the next video for the next exercise.